Welcome to the Longevity Breakout session. I'm Mary Bontrager, your moderator for this session. I recently retired from the Greater Des Moines Partnership, where I served as Executive Vice President of Talent Development. I have short blonde, wavy hair, blue eyes, and wear champagne-colored glasses. I'm wearing a purple blouse and sitting in front of my fireplace mantle in my hearth room in my home. My pronouns are she, her. So a 3-year study at Washington Mutual Inc. found a turnover rate of 8% among people with developmental disabilities, compared with an overall turnover rate of 45% in the general population. What a compelling statistic for any HR professional or hiring manager. During this session, our panelists will be discussing the many benefits of retaining employees with disabilities and sharing tips on how to build an inclusive environment, both cultural and physical, that fosters their growth and career satisfaction. Our panel of experts will share their expertise from the perspectives of service providers, physical space designer, and an employer. Joining us today are Kimberly Chance, Rural Solutions and Assistive Technology Team Lead at Easter Seals, Iowa, Tracy Kinninger, Program Director of Rural Solutions and Assistive Technology, Easter Seals, Iowa, Kevin Nordmeyer, Principal of Design Firm BNMI, and Brian Collins, Senior Manager of Real Estate and Facilities with Microsoft Corporation. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. Each of our panelists will share more information about themselves in their introduction. So let's begin with Kimberly and Tracy. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm Tracy Kinninger. I'm a white woman wearing glasses. I'm sitting in front of a window and a wall, and my pronouns are she and her. As Mary mentioned, both Kim and I work for Easter Seals, Iowa, and we hope to share with you our perspective from a client viewpoint, what we have experienced as staff in supporting people with disabilities, but certainly this is not scientific research, but more so hands-on and real experience. Easter Seals' mission is to provide exceptional services to ensure that people with disabilities, special needs, and their families have equal opportunity to live, learn, work, and play in their community. And our experiences that we will share with you today are based off of those real life experiences.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Chance. As stated before, I am a white woman with brown hair wearing a black floral shirt, sitting in front of a whiteboard, and my pronouns are she and her. Today we'll be talking about 10 strategies in 10 or 20 minutes to create the ideal corporate culture. These will consist of community, universal design, exceeding ADA compliance, collateral representation, choice, flexibility, creativity, evolution, teams, and leadership. Tip number 1 is to know your community. Know the resources all the way from your federal, state, and local as to how best to provide supports and services, not only to your employees, but the consumers that you represent as well. For example, with the COVID relief funds that we have just transitioned through, if an agency or an organization was not aware of the diversity in application of these relief funds, they may have been missed either for the organization as a whole or for specific employees or consumers that are represented by that organization. A local example would be Iowa Compass, an online database of services and supports for Iowans with disabilities, their family members, and service providers. On this slide, I provided the website link to Iowa Compass, which is www.iowacompass.org, the 800 number, as well as 711 in order to access relay services. Another example would be Easter Seals Iowa Assistive Technology Program itself, We are the state implementing entity for this Federal Assistive Technology Act here in Iowa. We serve all ages in all areas of the state. The services we provide include information referral for questions about assistive technology, which can consist of any device, resource, or product system that helps an individual with a disability, special need, or otherwise accomplish any type of task that without that tool, they would be unable to accomplish. We have a demonstration center on site where we can demonstrate over 1,000 types of assistive technology. We have a durable medical equipment loan program that runs solely off of refurbished durable medical equipment to lessen the fee and cost to Iowans who are in need of durable medical equipment or alternative options in addition to the DME that they already possess. We have a lending library where individuals can trial devices free of charge for 30 days. And we host an online assistive technology exchange where Iowans can post equipment that they are no longer in need of for sale or for free online for other Iowans to identify and contact them.
Tip number 2, universal design is the standard. Is universal design an exception to policy, or is it really implemented in all practices of your place of employment? Is it common language? Is trialing something, training, and troubleshooting of technology just common for all people, not just because you have a disability? What we often find is by creating technology, tools, policies, and practices that are just best for all people, we often are naturally accommodating individuals with disabilities. So tip number 2, universal design is the standard.
Tip number 3 is exceeding ADA compliance. When it comes to the Americans with Disabilities Act, it can feel quite overwhelming, and oftentimes individuals will have an inability to be able to translate what the ADA is stating into common practice for programmatical, physical, and digital accessibility and on the ground. There are readily achievable checklists through the ADA that individuals may possess to look at compliance in and around their workplace, but really thinking about how do we step beyond this? How do we step outside of this scope to ensure that it's not just the average access that's being met, but really these standards are exceeded? Making sure communications, both internal and external, are available to all individuals, that marketing is available in all different formats, internal paperwork from hiring to receiving invoices and information for their pay stubs, discussions within the workplace from online meetings to in-person meetings and recorded lectures, and ensuring that individuals are prepared to communicate with others who might be deaf or utilize alternative communication devices. When we talk about ADA compliancy, oftentimes we think about the physical standards. And one example is a 5-foot turning radius. An image on this slide shows a woman utilizing a walker to navigate down a hallway, and it's a very specific U-step walker. When it comes to ADA compliance, if you believe that a 5-foot radius is enough space, we encourage individuals to take mobility devices into that space and truly identify how cumbersome it can become trying to navigate those small areas with mobility devices. Other options would be online on your website. Can anybody access the information on the website? Again, knowing these standards might seem very overwhelming, and that's one reflection back to knowing your resources. Know the partners within your community or nationwide that can help translate these standards into actual practice within your organization and help you as an entity better comprehend what the implementation can look like. Tip number 3, exceed ADA compliance.
Tip number 4, Kim, if you can just move the slide to number 4, collateral representation. Who are the decision makers? Who are the employees? Are they individuals with disabilities? Who's sitting around the table at leadership? What are your hiring practices? Do you just promote a position, or do you do some assertive outreach on behalf of individuals with disabilities? When a person pulls up to your place of employment, does it appear that you are communicating, we welcome individuals with disabilities as our customers to work here? As Kim said, what about your website? Are there pictures of individuals with disabilities in leadership positions on your website? Are your applications accessible? Do you have a TTY? Does somebody answer it? Not only is this representation that you want, you desire to hire individuals with disabilities, but it communicates to your employees with disabilities, we appreciate you and we want you here at our place of employment. Tip number 4, collateral representation.
Tip number 5, choice is commonplace. Again, we specialize in assistive technology, so many of the ideas and concepts that we talk about are really founded in assistive technology implementation, like having low to high tech options available to choose from to accomplish a job responsibility. But choice is beyond that. Having choice in order to accomplish various tasks and the path at which individuals choose to take to accomplish those, and having choice when it comes to actual workplace settings. The images on this slide demonstrate choice in note-taking. When individuals attend a meeting and there's a message that is desired to be relayed to all individuals, and it is a spoken or a PowerPoint presentation, knowing that individuals have a choice in how they take that message from that room and take it back to their workplace and how they reflect upon it. Allow options such as pens and paper or electronic reminders and note-taking opportunities to individuals who attend those meetings. Record meetings and send them out via email as a follow-up. Record the message and send it up as a follow-up. Put that message into practice and give individuals that choice to implement it within their workplace. Tip number 5, choice is commonplace.
Tip number 6, flexibility. Where do you perform the job? Where does the greatest level of productivity occur? I think we learned a lot about this during the pandemic. What about the individual with the disability that maybe they have an exacerbation or a flare-up of their conditions? Do you allow for them to work at home a bit more than usual? Do you allow them to flex their hours? Maybe mornings are better than afternoons or evenings. What about the individual with the disability that's contemplating going full-time and has concerns about maybe losing some of their Social Security disability benefits? Do you support them? Do you encourage them? Do you allow for a step-by-step process to look at maybe moving from part-time gradually up to full-time? Do you allow for 30-hour work weeks? What about relief on call to help out as needed, as a person's able, so that they can still be a contributing member of the workplace? It's possible that persons with disabilities have entered into your place of employment with the disability. It's also possible they acquired their disability while working at your place of employment. What will you do to be flexible, to keep them, to maintain them, to help them through their journey of employment? Tip number 6, flexibility.
Tip number 7, be creative, refraining from one-size-fits-all solutions. Again, it's just as applicable when talking about assistive technology implementation as it is any workplace solution. Having DIY or do-it-yourself options. When individuals identify a problem or a concern within the workplace, being creative on how to resolve the issue demonstrates not only that you welcome feedback, but also that you are engaged and you want to empower solutions to be implemented. Allow individuals to trial options and to provide feedback, options from assistive technology all the way to the way things are being done around the workplace. The image is the example for being creative. This is a design for a phone holder created out of corrugated plastic by Therese Wilcom, who is an individual that creates all sorts of assistive technology solutions. Using corrugated plastic can identify ergonomic approaches to many technology-based needs, which comes up more often than not, especially when working virtual and having pop-up or shared workspaces. Making sure that when individuals have concerns, they're heard and you're being creative on how those solutions are being identified.
Tip number 8, allow room for evolution. We talked a little bit about this before in the prior tips of a person's abilities can change, their desires can change, their families can change. So do you allow for that flexibility and support and encourage that evolution? As Kim mentioned with the do-it-yourself assistive technology, we all have different ways that we complete a task. But persons with disabilities are no different. How they complete a task might be different than somebody else, but we all get to the finish line. We just may have a different journey to get there. And empowering employees with disabilities to demonstrate new or additional skills. So what we often experience is a person with a disability enters into the workforce, they obtain employment, and people don't look at advancements, what other opportunities exist, what learning and growth options are there, whether it be to look at additional positions within the place of employment. Is it even just some learning and growth opportunities, but not necessarily a change in position? Are there other carve-outs of other positions that they could look for? It's not hiring a person, they do a good job, that's where they stay. It is looking for opportunities and empowering individuals with disabilities to be able to learn and grow and gain additional skills. Tip number 8, allow room for evolution.
Tip number 9, promote support teams. Don't wait for people with disabilities to come to a supervisor or until evaluation time in order to talk to them. Do it today, start the conversation, and take that conversation directly to that team member, directly to that employee, to engage and build rapport, to start talking about all the other aspects of all these other tips. Reach out and ensure that outreach is occurring on all levels by countless contacts, not simply by the supervisor of the employee. Identify support teams for the employees. This might consist of a job coach, a supervisor, a peer mentor, countless additional individuals, and it can be multitudes of these individuals. Meet frequently, but meet responsibly. Make sure these meetings are productive and there's no meetings that should have been emails. Mentor with peer support. This might be a peer that's in a leadership position similar to the individual with a disability, or a peer of job tasks and job responsibilities, or of the disability or brain health themselves. Tip number 9, promote support teams.
And our final tip, look around the room and diversify. It's possible you feel like you need to go the extra mile to recruit and retain people with disabilities. Oftentimes, persons have been told all their life they can't, or they're afraid of not succeeding in employment. There might be countless fears of how people will treat them. Will they be able to do the job? Will they lose their benefits? There's lots of real, not just perceived, real fears here. So are you going out of your way, going the extra mile to work side by side a person? Do people with disabilities work in your janitorial department, or are they sitting at the leadership and executive teams? Are they fully engaged in your operation? Are they on the board of directors? Are you fully inclusive as it relates to your standard operating policies and procedures? And helping people with disabilities feel just like everybody else, that they're part of the process. Stop and look around. Are people with disabilities represented in your entire organization? And finally, we would just like to share with you our resources today. And as Kim mentioned in tip number 1, know your resources. We are your resource. There is the equivalent of one of us in every state and territory across the country. It's not expected that you're the expert or you know it all. Reach out to us. How can we support you? How can we provide you with information? How can we brainstorm with you? We're not necessarily the experts, but we have been fortunate enough to have lots of experience with real live persons and successes. And we would want nothing more than to join forces with you to enhance the longevity of employing individuals with disabilities. Thank you so much.
Tracy and Kimberly, thank you so very much for that insightful presentation. That was such valuable advice and common sense solutions. And I have to tell you, I have a young friend who next week is celebrating her 6th anniversary at her place of employment. And number 8 and 9, she references often the fact that her employer does allow her opportunities to demonstrate new skills, and she speaks so highly every time of her support team. So just great information, and thank you so much for joining us today. So next we will be joined by Kevin Nordmeyer, principal of BNMI. Kevin was also the lead designer on the Harkin Institute facility. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about that place making and the importance of physical space as it relates to inclusive office design. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mary. I'm really excited to be here participating today. I want to discuss inclusive design, the making of the Tom and Ruth Harkin Center. I'm Kevin Nordmeyer. I'm an architect and principal at BNIM Architects in Des Moines. We have offices in Des Moines, Kansas City, and San Diego. I'm a middle-aged male with sandy colored hair and glasses, and I'm sitting in a very boring room with a white wall behind me. And my pronouns are he and him. One thing our firm likes to do and has done ever since the beginning of sustainable design is really think about the definition of sustainable design. Sustainable design, typically has dealt with issues of energy, water, ecology, material resources. And what we want to do in recent years, what we want to do is expand that notion of sustainability to include things such as wellness and equity. And we think that's really important as we move into the future generations to think about holistically what sustainable design and universal design and equity and wellness all mean in terms of creating better, more highly productive places for people to work and live. As we started the project for the Harkin Institute, the first thing we did before we drew any lines on paper was we looked at the Disability Advisory Committee that the Harkin Institute utilizes for their policies and programs. And they were meeting in Washington, D.C. in December or in November of the year prior to us designing the project. And we started asking them questions about what we should incorporate in the design in terms of universal design strategies and designing a place that's truly sort of gracious and welcoming to anyone. So they were involved in the early programming concept design stage, as you see in this image here. They were also involved in review a couple of different times virtually in our construction documents phase. And then we did a bit of surveying them when we got to the furniture design portion of the project. Some of the overarching comments that they developed in that very first meeting, all we knew at that time was, given the site, that it was going to be a 2-story building. Couldn't be a 1-story building, given just the logistics of the site and location. And the first thing they mentioned was the disability groups are just not included in the conversation. Voices are not engaged. These voices are not engaged with building designs typically. So they were thankful that they were being asked. They said the biggest issue is no one asked that question. No one asked, are there barriers that still exist? And Senator Harkin, who you see in this image here, mentioned that the ADA is just a starting point, as Kim and Tracy just mentioned. The ADA is a baseline, but it's not the end. And Senator Harkin, even though he created that and it's been revolutionary and really important for 30 years, it is still a beginning and we need to go beyond that. And they all reiterated that point. Many times accommodations are an afterthought, and many times the wheelchair is the assumed control. And they started to really expand the level of thinking for our team in terms of considering the really broad spectrum of everyone that has various levels of disability, low vision, including blind, deaf, including those that just have hearing problems, or those that just have difficulty walking, to those that are in wheelchairs, to other issues of autism, nervousness, and things like that as well. So really that broad spectrum is what we wanted to consider when we looked at the design of the building. And many times they noted that spaces and surfaces are just not always conducive to navigation. So really think about generous and gracious space. This is a site plan on the screen before you right now. Drake University is to the top side of this image. University Avenue in Des Moines runs right north of the building. The building sits on this corner lot right at 28th and University in Des Moines. And there's a path on campus that looks directly at this building as you're walking on the path toward the south. And had we designed this to the city ordinances would have told us that the building had to be snuggled up against the east property line, snuggled up against the north property line, and the entrance had to be off of the University Avenue from the north. And the parking we knew was going to be in the back. It's the only place it could be. And that parking was about 7 feet higher than the street level. So we had to immediately start asking for variances to the zoning ordinance. And it was probably one of the most enjoyable planning and zoning meetings I've ever been to, because it happened to coincide with when Senator Harkin was in town. So Senator Harkin was there, a couple of the key influential board members, and it was a really fun experience being able to argue for sustainability with those folks in the room. And there was no way that the Planning and Zoning Commission was going to not agree with our approach. But what we did here is we pushed the building back from the corner so that it allowed us immediate space for those with disabilities to park and to immediately get into the front door of the building at grade with no barriers in front of them. And it also allowed us to have a plaza space to the east of the building that gives the building a presence and a landscape in this urban setting. All of the stormwater is managed on site. The whole building followed the Green Globes protocols. And so we have solar photovoltaics that are going on the roof. And so we have a highly sustainable building that we've started to weave in these notions of universal design and equity and inclusion in terms of how people get to the site, how people park, how people are dropped off, and how people can just very easily and graciously enter the building. This is an image looking from the northeast toward the building. We wanted the glass corner of the building, the sort of the public nature of the building, the gallery, have a presence to this plaza that I mentioned, have a presence to this street, and have a presence back toward the Drake University campus, where the Harkin Institute is inextricably linked. This is an interior view of the gallery space. The second thing the committee said when we met with them that November was, if it has to be a 2-story building, connect the floors with a ramp. Don't rely only on an elevator. to get between floors. So you'll see in some of these images, we chose to take this ramp and make it become sort of the sinew and connective tissue between all of the spaces in the building, so that it's the preferred route for everybody in the building to experience the building from the ramp as they ascend from the lower level to the upper level. This is a view from campus. So this is looking from campus on that axis back to the building to the south. And so, you know, this was the image that we really wanted for students on campus or visitors on campus to see this glowing and light-filled object to the south as they walk on campus. And this is that building in the evening as it's sort of glowing at night and presenting itself to the public in a very open, gracious manner to the neighborhood. This then is the opposing view from inside of the building down that axis on campus. And so there's just multiple viewpoints and vantage points from where you can experience the space, no matter if you are using a cane, if you're fully able-bodied, or if you have a wheelchair. You all experience these same sort of vistas and vantage points. And then this, lastly, in terms of sort of some views of the outside, is the view from those parking spaces that are right close to the front door. I have multiple sclerosis. I utilize a wheelchair most of the time, but the days where my legs, you know, are cooperating, I can walk with a cane to the front door. So the distance for me, and many Americans, the distance for me from that parking stall to the front door is incredibly critical. And so you can see here, this is about as close as you can possibly park a handicapped vehicle to a front door in this building. And then you see the plaza space to the right that's going to be lush with landscape as it matures. So again, we wanted to expand the definition of universal design as well. We wanted to use the given definitions. North Carolina State University many years ago developed a series of design principles for universal design. We wanted to even expand beyond that to start thinking about best practices for inclusion and equity as well. Many of the things Kim and Tracy just talked about as well. We wanted to blend those together into a greater definition of what universal design could be. So the items on the left part of the screen here, the universal design principles, are the ones that have been around for many, many years. There's equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. Those are all still very relevant and very valid. And if we add to that, at the bottom left, if we want to add to that best practices for inclusion and equity, we think that equals these four sort of topics on the right. So we're trying to simplify it for people's memory and for our own sort of use, and to sort of four broader guiding principles, if you will. And we see those as generous space, equitable experiences, a clear path, and individual empowerment. And we're still thinking with the Harkin Institute about these and about if these are the right terms and things like that. But this is where we're at today and what we generated when we were developing the building project. So in terms of generous space, this is a phrase that defines this for us. So to create space where you don't have to ask for accommodations, what is needed is available. So that when you're approaching a building, it's just everybody enters the building the same way. There's no special accommodation that needs to be made, is how you should have the mindset here. And generous space, another term we've used a lot, is just being very gracious. A sort of a gracious building spirit is something that's really important to this particular building, and it should be for every new building in the world, to be honest. And related to that, some bullet points, some strategies for generous space for us were the path width. Here you can see the ramp is 6 feet wide at its minimum dimension, which allows two people to pass each other in wheelchairs, or to go beside each other in wheelchairs, or for two people that are signing to walk together as they're ascending. So it's not about minimum ADA widths, it's about practical widths to allow people to be better than and to be more gracious as a building design. There's also places of rest. Here you can see this is as you're ascending the ramp. This is just a place of rest at a landing spot that's actually right above the main entry canopy, and it's a place where you can sit and meet with somebody, you can gather. So the ramp is just not a conveyance device, it's also a journey, and there's also places to experience and to meet and so forth along it. There's also orientation and navigation. Signage is really important, and being able to navigate space is really important in terms of this idea of generous space. And then door access and flow. The image that Kim had shown a moment ago of the person using a walker in a hallway, that might meet minimum ADA widths, but just like she mentioned, being able to access a door while the diagram in ADA might technically be okay for a person in a manual wheelchair, someone that's in a larger motorized wheelchair may have difficulty maneuvering within that same distance. And so door access and flow is another generous space concept. In terms of equitable experiences, we want to solve for the function necessary in the most inclusive way possible, non-exclusionary. No one is excluded from an experience because of their ability, gender, etc. So in terms of equitable experiences, meeting in the round was an important concept for deaf space, for those that are deaf or low hearing. So you can see the little diagram on the bottom, being able to meet in the round and see faces and see interpreters and so forth. Utilizing the appropriate technologies so that you can do sign language and virtual conferencing, just like we're doing today. The primary circulation path needs to be shared by all. Designated spaces for restrooms and so forth. I'll show you here in a minute what we did there. And then elevator access, you can see the diagram on the lower right, having the elevator exit and entrance off of the main circulation path is an equitable experience. And we, by code, you have to still create men's and women's rooms. And so the single user concept, we had to ask for special exception in the city of Des Moines. And you can see here, it takes up no more room, and actually was a little cheaper to build a single user restroom. So we have single user restrooms throughout the building. They can just be used by anyone. There's no designation of men's or women's or anything. It's all just designated by function, and it provides just sort of an equitable sort of experience. A clear path, allow for an environment that is intuitive to the user, including regular and part-time users and visitors. And for us, that means there's information redundancy, multiple ways to navigate and read spaces. There's reduction of sensory noise so that someone can sort of focus and understand where they're at in space. This canopy, for example, over the main entrance is intentionally low so that acoustics change for those that are blind, so they can kind of sense that there's a canopy above them, that an entrance might be approaching. The entrance sequence as a result, the lighting, curved sight lines so you don't run into somebody if you're coming to a blind corner where two people are meeting. If you have a curved corner, there's easier access. And then visual clarity in the design is really important. And lastly, individual empowerment. There are no limitations in one's ability to use a space throughout the day. So there needs to be a spirit in this idea of graciousness we keep coming back to, that anyone can get anywhere and use anything in the building. And for us, that's about the accessible technologies that Kim and Tracy talked about, providing sort of seamless use of that throughout a building. Just unlimited choices throughout a building. We also incorporated a wellness room so that not only a nursing mother, but someone with a migraine or someone's just having a bad day or I'm stressing out, it's a place where you can tune the lighting colors to fit your particular needs as a human being. And then the elevator placement, the other thing that the user group told us is that utilize a larger elevator so that two people in a wheelchair can get on the elevator. It goes to the upper floor and you can get out without turning around. So we have an elevator that has an indoor and an outdoor at opposite ends, and it's a larger elevator to accommodate multiple people in multiple wheelchairs. And lastly, we took these same comments with Pigott as the furniture vendor, and Herman Miller is the furniture manufacturer. We took these concepts into the furniture design as well. So for furniture, we wanted to utilize a comprehensive approach for furniture selection incorporating these same guiding principles of accessibility, inclusion, and equity. Here's an office space up top where this shows the private offices with glass on the right, open office on the left, daylight access from above. And so here you can see what they chose to do is think about settings of furniture and then products. And we're in the process of creating a book about all of these strategies currently and looking at all these different design ideas into sort of a book that people can learn from. And in this case, all of the furniture is adjustable height and adaptable and modifiable and flexible so that multiple people can navigate and utilize any space in the building. And so with that, I'd like to thank you very much for being able to participate in this. And my email is there if any of you would like to contact me. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you so much. I found it so fascinating when talking about inclusive culture, workplace, and physical environment, how there was such a parallel of those considerations between what you talked about and what Tracy and Kimberly talked about, such as commonplace solutions for all, flexibility, equitable experiences, individual empowerment. Again, just a great presentation, beautiful building, congratulations, and thank you for being a part of our panel today. Our last panelist is Brian Collins. As I said, he's Senior Manager of Real Estate and Facilities with Microsoft Corporation, and we're just so thrilled to have Brian joining us today, representing Microsoft, global leader in the space of inclusive employers and as being an inclusive employer. So Brian, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Collins. I'm a senior manager at the Real Estate and Facilities Group at Microsoft. I'm based in Redmond, Washington. Today, I'm sitting in my home office. I am a male in his late 40s. I have short gray and black hair. I wear glasses, and I'm wearing a navy polo shirt. At the Microsoft headquarters in Redmond, Washington, we have approximately 60,000 employees, vendors, and visitors coming to the office each day. The Microsoft corporate real estate team, our primary job is to build and maintain working environments that enable productivity amongst our workforce. This means the entire workforce. Our goal is to deliver spaces, services, and technologies that empower our employees across the spectrum of disability and create environments that empower us all thanks to the promise of universal and inclusive design. Most companies comply with accessibility legislation or code that are mandated locally, such as the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA, or the UK's Equality Act. At Microsoft, our target is to go above and beyond those requirements. Today, I'll share with you a little bit about the Microsoft mission, some of the disabilities that we focus on, our real estate strategy, and how we're improving the physical environment here at Microsoft. A transformation in Microsoft company culture challenges us to reach higher in the areas of inclusiveness and accessibility. Inclusion lies at the heart of our mission statement to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. We know that there are over 1 billion people on the planet who have disabilities. And for most of the 20th century, people define disability as the result of an individual's condition. The problem was with the person. Today, we know that disability happens at the point of interaction between a person and their environment, whether it's physical, cognitive, or that social inclusion are a mismatch between what the person wants to achieve and the environment that does not support them. At Microsoft, we believe that people with disabilities are a strength for our company and a talent pool that adds not just diversity, but expertise in and experience to make our products, services, and our culture better. In April, we launched a 5-year initiative to help close that disability divide, or the gap between resources and opportunities available to those with disabilities and those without. That includes creating technology, software, and hardware that is accessible to people with a wide-ranging physical, neurological abilities, increasing the percentage of the Microsoft workforce that has disabilities, and helping people with disabilities gain education and job skills, connecting them with employers. And we know that our real estate team has a key role to play in that. To create the most accessible spaces on the planet, we want to include accessibility from the outset. Accessibility has got to be early in the development cycle. You have to bring in lived experiences of people with disabilities right from the get-go. And if you capture it there, then accessibility doesn't become something you're fixing. If you're launching a new product or a website, you should never, ever be in remediation mode. It should be part of the design. So our strategy within the corporate real estate group is to look at our physical environment, of course, the services that we provide, creating a mindset with our team, using great language and communication skills, but also prioritizing where we need it. So we focus on partnering with our ERGs, our employee resource groups, to help provide the best solutions, those lived solutions that I alluded to a couple of minutes ago. And we also hire companies that are disability owned. We want to make sure people are paid for the services that they provide and the advice that we get. We also provide services like lobby hosting, dining, and transportation. We need to make sure our vendors are trained on how to have conversations with people. We need to make sure our own staff has the confidence to do so. When we create apps for our employees, Microsoft usually looks for a level AA on the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And the easiest way for any developer to check their app is to run the Accessibility Insights tool on Chrome or Edge. This tool scans the page and looks for the most common issues like color contrast, missing alt text, etc. But the key here is testing the user experience with people who have a disability and ensuring that's aligned with their expectation. On our awareness and mindset, we insist now that all of our staff complete the Microsoft Accessibility 101 training. We also leverage Microsoft Office 365 accessibility training. And our mantra is to design for the few and impact the many. For example, pre-COVID, we had been piloting and installing hands-free door openers on our site. With COVID and people being afraid to touch things, we expanded that really quickly across the globe. So everybody coming to a Microsoft building now doesn't have to push the door open. They can just swipe, wave, and the door opens. Again, that idea of design for the few and impact the many. On language, we want people to be confident in engaging in the discussion. We want people to embrace the language. So we don't talk about special abilities or diverse abilities or different abilities. People with disabilities are proud of their identity. People with disabilities come to that once they've seen they're going to be supported and their disability is going to be seen as a positive. We've got to make sure that people with disabilities are seen with the strength that they bring to us. We know updating is quite a journey for us. We have a multi-year plan to increase and impact our spaces, but using the idea of accommodations, we work with our employees to make sure we are doing those installations and improvements as quick as we can for those who need it. So Some examples of what we're doing around our physical environment. We're looking at things like high color contrast braille and raised print tactile maps, things like "You Are Here" in our buildings, lobby entrances, pedestrian paths, and cafes. High color contrast ground surface tactile signs and indicators are placed on the hardscape across our walking paths, usually at a decision point, such as an intersection or a shuttle stop sign. So you can see on one of the images here, these 4-sided signposts are located throughout our campus, usually at those intersections. They have braille, they have high contrast print, and directional arrows. We've also identified stair-free routes to clearly find pathways that are stair-free. These signs are located at, again, key decision points throughout the campus, and also at the right of doors that lead into secondary building entrances. We have low glare lighting mounted on the underside of stair railings, and in our interiors, we're using high color contrast, braille, and raised print to identify stairs and railings. In our kitchenettes and copy rooms, we have a variety of orientated display of storage, high color contrast braille, again, for storage containers, for refrigerated drinks, food, coffee, and condiments. In our kitchenettes and cafeterias, that high color contrast braille and raised print labels are used for containers. We're using braille and speech output devices for accessible ordering and point of sales transactions. And we've introduced new icons to identify food orders that are ready, replacing just the red, orange, and color we had in the past. And this helps people who are colorblind. We want our lobby experience to be one of the best. So we've introduced dual height counters at the reception stations. You can see that on the image on the left-hand side. And that, that dual height perimeter counter allows for a wheelchair to go in and to sign in while other folks maybe coming into our building are standing with our lobby host. We're looking at chairs of multiple heights, widths, and firmness. And for social seating, we want at least one location for a wheelchair user to join in the conversation. And finally, low pile carpet to allow a wheelchair to move over it. Additional items that we are building in include accessible navigation and tactile guidance indicators across our bridges and across our pathways between buildings. We're introducing accessible elevator call button systems where one can use their voice to call the elevator. We are using accessible emergency evacuation stations, parking where it's convenient, and lots of space dedicated to our accessible parking. And again, our building entries have consistent locations of accessible features. And those, so people can recognize where in every building the badge swipe entry point is. All of our entry doors have to be accessible, and we're even introducing accessible bike storage areas. On some of our interiors, we've been introducing gender neutral, accessible, assisted use toilet rooms, and we're putting those on every floor in every building. Our laboratories have an 11-inch reach to trigger points of automatic faucets and soap dispensers in our toilets and restrooms. And over 10% of our dining tables will be fully accessible with forward approach knee and toe clearance. We're introducing hearing loops in selected conference rooms and meetings, and spaces for active movement during work and focus time, or quiet time to accommodate the range of neurodiverse concerns that our employees have, acknowledging that, for example, people who are on the autism spectrum are both subject to hyper and hyposensitivity. So In summary, we know that there's a lot to do, and this is a journey that we are on, and we invite you to join us on that journey. Thank you very much.